What would you say if I told you there's no such thing as compassion fatigue? Before you respond, listen to this discussion with Cayce Howe of sustainablecaring.com. Hi, it's Margaret Meloni, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma Podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. The fatigue is real, but where does it really come from? In caring for others, there is the fatigue that comes from the actual work. Now, compassion is actually endless and boundless. As humans, sometimes we may face a lack, but this does not have to be true. We must not forget wisdom. Compassion without wisdom is attachment. Hi, everyone. We are back with Cayce Howe. And I say back because even though we are in Season 3 of the Death Dhamma Podcast, he was we're going to call him one of the OGs, the originals of Season 1, where we talked some really specific things about death and grief and what was helpful. And now in Season 3, we are here with Cayce, who is an esteemed Dharma teacher. We're talking about attachment. Hi, Cayce. Why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Hey, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. What's been going on with me? All of my focus recently, other than like pure traditional Dharma stuff, has been around my company, Sustainable Caring. Mm-hmm. So I started this company with a wonderful psychiatrist, meditation teacher, Dr. Monisha Vasa. Yeah, and we take care of people that take care of people. And we focus on, humans taking care of humans that take care of humans.
My gosh, I love that. Could be a slogan.
Yeah, it's like a little tagline. So sustainablecaring.com. We offer several different, programs for people in the caring industry. Yeah.
So, like, if I were a nurse, I would be someone you would help because you're helping me and I help others. Is that
correct? Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So we have programs, we have support groups, we have lots of things to assist. So that some are in person, some are online. So very accessible.
That's beautiful. And yeah. I do happen to recall that you do use some mindfulness and other practices in your work with people, but it's maybe not necessarily, I don't know, maybe not framing it as Buddhism, but it definitely is Buddhist oriented. Is that fair to say it that way?
Yeah, it's all secular, but definitely a lot of work around empathy, compassion. In fact, we were lucky enough to be asked by UC Irvine to create a curriculum in empathy, which was very well attended and received. That was awesome. Mm-hmm. So empathy, compassion, self-compassion, burnout, or compassion fatigue, things around that, just burnout in general. But the techniques that we use, like a lot of psychology today, a lot of it comes from the Buddhist practices. They've been woven in to a lot of into the clinical settings. Yeah.
So, you say fatigue and burnout, and I think things that can cause suffering. And I frame it that way because, this season we are all about attachment, which really separated into clinging and aversion. Or, as one of my friends said, oh, you mean the origin of suffering? Yes, I do. So I bet you have seen some situations of clinging and aversion where it has caused some suffering in others. And I bet you can teach us about that a little bit, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting segue, because I was talking about compassion fatigue. And I use that word because people know that word, or that phrase, I should say.
Yes, absolutely.
But I actually don't really believe in compassion fatigue. And what I mean by that, to unpack that a little bit, is that compassion obviously is endless. Like the actual energy of compassion, it's like the sun. It just shines, and it's really endless. When we're feeling like this compassion fatigue, or burnout, I should say, it's really attachment to outcome fatigue. So speaking of attachment, right? Because it's the outcome piece. So we can give, but then as soon as we wanted to look a certain way, or to work in a certain way, then of course, if it doesn't, then whenever we have that expectation, then if it doesn't work out, there's like an emotional hit in some way. So if we look at like a nurturing situation, like a child is ailing and the mother comes and takes care of that child, and let's say they're ailing, there's nothing that the mother could do. It's like a cold or a flu or something, right? To actually fix it. But there's definitely a nurturing and nourishing quality that she could offer. So a blanket, maybe some medicine, some soup, or whatnot. So that nurturing quality, of course, is compassion, not wanting to see self or others suffer, right? When loving kindness meets suffering, there's that shift into the yearning for that individual to be free from suffering. So yeah, that energy, that just that giving energy is infinite. Like it could just go on and on. But we have to work with the wisdom side, right? The two wings. We have compassion without the wisdom piece. That's what turns to attachment, right? The wisdom piece without the compassion turns to nihilism, right?
Okay.
And the wisdom piece, so when I say wisdom, I'm like wisdom of impermanence, wisdom of interdependence, wisdom of dukkha,
right?
Like 3 marks of existence. Usually we would say the wisdom of emptiness, but we could basically say the wisdom that I can't control everything, right? So this is just basic wisdom that I can give, and yet I can't control. We live in an interdependent world. There's a lot of moving parts here, but what I can't control is my efforting towards kindness and compassion. And it's like the mixture of those two. If we have that kindness and compassion without the attachment piece of like wanting a certain outcome, we can become extremely resilient, right? Extremely resilient in our caring for ourselves and others, right?
Yes.
There's so much resiliency there.
So I'm going to pick at this a little bit. That's not the word, but like I'm pulling on this thread, and this is why. Part of me, so 100% all in with what you're saying, and you walked me through it in such a way that I'm like, yes, I get this. And then the other part of me is like, wait a minute. I feel like Cayce might be saying something that might be a little controversial, because I feel like there's so much out there about compassion fatigue and about people in, these caring roles, and, what they've gone through over the last few years and continue to go through. And I'm balancing that, though, with what you're saying, which is that compassion is boundless. There's infinite compassion in existence for us all to draw upon. And yet, if I'm that, if I was, in the middle of 2020, I was that, a COVID ward nurse, I may have felt something that I would have called it compassion fatigue. And I think that in my industry, that would have been like a known, accepted, look at Margaret, she has compassion fatigue. But I think you're also saying that I didn't need to have that in a way, because I was getting that compassion fatigue because I was so greatly attached to what I wanted to see happen to my patients. I'm going to stop now, and you can jump in and go like, Margaret, no, or yes, or.
Well, I'm just glad that you brought that up, because a lot of these things, they can seem paradoxical, and like I said, there's a lot of different ways to view it, and so no, I fully agree with you, and I wouldn't call that necessarily compassion fatigue. I would just call it fatigue, and because especially in in the examples that you were using in the world of healthcare, there's a lot of systemic things that are happening that just need changing. And the things that we do, let's say in the healthcare world, working with wellness, we do so very delicately and not saying like, hey, you should be more resilient in this, crazy environment where you're not sleeping, you're working too much, and all of these systemic things that really do need shifting and changing. What I'm speaking to more is to an internal, how we work with things internally, right? And the external can definitely overthrow us.
Right.
Just like when we're working with mindfulness and compassion in mental health facilities, it's like, hey, it doesn't work for everybody all the time, because if, like myself, I've suffered from a ton of anxiety and panic attacks, and I've been overwhelmed, and I can't reach into my toolbox of meditation and mindfulness for everything.
Right.
Luckily, it has helped me gradually, delicately, gently. It's helped me overcome those things slowly. But it's not a one size fits all, and there's a lot of different factors. So I think it's they're not mutually exclusive. Like while we're working for better work conditions, for example, and maybe in our lives, if you're not in a healthcare worker, you might be in a very chaotic time in your life, like while you're working with those things. And some of those things are not going to change. And it's just here, to the best of our ability, see if we can mix in like our efforting with the wisdom of impermanence, for example, and the wisdom of I don't know what's next, the wisdom of don't know mind. Like, there's so much obviously that we're adding to it, like a lot of constructs within the mind of like, oh, I wish it was like this, or I wish it was like that, or once I get this, it's going to be okay, and all of that. But in reality, there's a lot of what we just don't know, and then that's the non-attachment piece. The non-attachment is, I don't know what's next. So that allows me to sit with my pain right now, but I don't need to sit with tomorrow's pain because it's not here yet. I don't need to sit with catastrophizing mind. I don't need to sit with these, what could be infinite probabilities that may or may not ever come to fruition. Right. So, with this tool as of, I could just be with, this here I can give. And that's it.
Okay. So now I'm seeing it differently. I'm seeing, like you said, actual physical fatigue because of so many hours and so much work. And maybe some people might call that compassion fatigue because I work in a profession that's associated with giving compassion. But perhaps at another level, it's an inner weariness, and an inner weariness that I might experience because I don't mean to sound trite if I say worrying about things that don't need to be worrying about, because I don't want to be discounting what people are experiencing. But like this inner weariness that is coming from, I'm discouraged because I want all my patients to get well. I feel sad because I think this person is going to die tonight. I want there to be fewer patients. These different things.
Yeah. And obviously this is a subtle practice, and it's one that it takes a lot of discernment, like a lot of wisdom, to kind of look at, and a lot of kindness towards self, right?
Yeah,
also just like self-compassion, like, and just really being kind with all of it, like being kind with our expectations, because even our expectations are compassion, right? Like, I wish this person would feel better because of course you have compassion, for them, like that sincere wish, and you have compassion for yourself. Like, I wish I could do better or something like this. So there might be guilt, it could be shame, it could be perfectionism, all of these things that come up. And they're just human. It's just human for these things to come up, right? So
finding a way to work in this situation and doing the best I can and working to help create an outcome, but not being attached to that outcome, like understanding that I can't control all the various things that are going to happen.
yeah, isn't that crazy? It's a crazy concept, passionate non-attachment. It's something that we're not really, I say not born with, or society doesn't really train us. We're very goal oriented.
Yes.
And so it's like, if I'm going to do all of this work and it's not going to turn out the way that I wanted, like, what is the use? And yet
and I hear people say that, like, why should I try then?
Why should I try? Why should I try? And when you think about it, even for just a moment, it's ridiculous because it's all uncertainty. What Ajahn Chah, like trying to find certainty in the uncertain. It's just ridiculous because of impermanence and interdependence. Just to think, just for a moment, all of us think, every single particle of matter is changing every single moment. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything is changing every single moment.
Nothing I'm sitting on is solid.
Nothing. And then we're trying to find certainty in that. It's like your action is going to be reciprocated or going to lead to a certain outcome. It's kind of accidental. So what we want to do instead is get in touch with the moment itself of the act that we're doing. It's so fulfilling in the moment to be of service, in the moment to be kind, in the moment of activity. It feels good to be engaged. It feels good to work hard. It feels good to give it your all. It feels good to try. It feels like shit to not try. Right? Like what if? Right? But trying and failing feels way better than never trying.
And maybe we need to change our definition of failing, or maybe not even say failing.
I fully agree.
Right?
No,
maybe it's not failing. Like if I'm there and I'm providing good care and I'm doing the best I can, I can't force an outcome for a patient. I can do what seems logical to do and provide emotional support when it seems like that's the appropriate thing to do. But I can't force the outcome. So if the outcome isn't what I felt I was working for, then it would be good if I could walk away and not go, well, I failed today.
Yeah. And obviously, I think in some of these instances will be more difficult, depending on the situation. But obviously, in most situations, failing is just learning. And I like that phrase, fail quickly, right? Like it's more of a business thing, like fail fast.
Fail forward fast. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So you see if like your business models works or something, like fail quickly, or I heard a sales thing about counting the no's, like these salespeople, they count how many no's they get because after so many no's, they get a yes.
Yes, I hear that one a lot.
So that one's kind of cool.
Persevered up until 100 no's, which is like awesome, by the way. But
awesome. Yeah. So, but it just shows that there's different ways, to look at it. But I think the kindness and the impermanence, the interdependence are kind of pillars in non-attachment. It's like, and kind of coming back to the moment too, which I mentioned, it's like pay attention to, for example, with meditation, like meditation, I've definitely had more quote unquote unsuccessful or unpleasant meditations than pleasant ones. But I never had a meditation. I never meditated and then regretted it. Right? I've never went for a run and regretted it, even though it would like it's stuck the
There
whole
are
time.
different experiences. There's different experiences on the cushion. There's different experiences when you're running.
Right, but the key is that in in the moment of striving, in the moment of bringing myself to do those two things, that's where the satisfaction has to come from. It can't come from some future something. And that's where the expectation and attachment, the grasping mind, comes from, right? I also want to just say too, because I mean, if we're doing something on attachment, this has probably already been said, but I want to just say this explicitly too, because when we speak of non-attachment, it can be kind of abstract or obscure. But in practice, where the rubber meets the road, we do this with every meditation, and it's the very foundation of, say, Buddhist teachings, where Buddha taught non-grasping mind and non-attachment, and the experience of resting in, I don't like the word, the state of non-attachment, but accessing a part of our awareness that is in equanimity, in a state, or again, I don't like that word state because it means changing, but there's an unchanging part of our beingness that is resting in non-attachment. And we recognize this like when we meditate and there's a thought that goes by, we notice that our mind has been caught up in that thought and we release that thought. So that's that moment of non-grasping mind. That's the moment of non-attachment. And we could abide kind of as that, like as that non-attachment. In other words, attachment comes from this self-serving kind of egoic me and mind that needs to grab hold of something because it's trying to figure something out. But we are already figured out. Like we are already it. Like we're already what we're trying to figure out, right? Like a tree is a tree. Tree doesn't need to figure out its treeness. It's not trying to be more of a tree.
Trees don't go find themselves.
Yeah, the tree's just like, I'm a tree, but we don't really look because of our grasping tendencies. We're not turning inward, as Chogyam Trungpa would say, or not Chogyam Trungpa, but Urgyen Rinpoche would say, the difference between samsara and nirvana is the direction that you're looking. If we're looking inward, we're in nirvana. Looking outward, we're in samsara. So that looking inward, we notice equanimity, non-grasping, non-attachment is quote unquote self. The mind needs to verb its way away from the moment. It needs to grab onto something.
Okay.
It needs an activity. Like the mind is naturally unattached. Well, how could it not be? Because if it just doesn't do anything, which means true nature. True nature is, what's the true nature of the mind? Non-grasping, is hanging out. Something comes by, our habit, we've trained the mind to do is grab hold of stuff.
Right.
And why we grab hold on stuff is super deep, right? Like because we think it's going to bring this, and this. We can go on and on, right? Which is like the Dharma is all about supporting the necessary tools needed to really harness that non-grasping aspect of mind, right? But where the rubber meets the road, when we speak about attachment, it's just simply that. When noticing when the mind has gone away, with that magical moment of mindfulness, like when we wake up,
right,
and then we say, "Oh, I'm going to come back to the breath." Well, we just practiced, non-attachment, non-grasping mind
by coming back and just being with the breath.
Yeah, and not following. That non-following of whatever's coming next, because it's another moment of like, whoa, here we go, right? We're gonna get taken away or not.
Definitely, like on the mat in the meditation, definitely the bringing back of the mind and the following the breath. And then, the question that everyone always asks, I think, or brings up is, so now I'm walking around in the world. I'm not meditating right now. Hopefully the fact that I have meditated helps me walk around in the world. But I'm walking around in the world and I'm just me, Margaret. I'm not a monk or a nun. I'm not an enlightened being. And grasping at things like doing my job and the outcomes of the job. And, will I be able to pay the gas bill and what's for dinner. And
Yeah, that's not grasping. Those are just thoughts, right?
okay.
And I
Okay.
know where you're going with that. It's like the thinking is not grasping. In other words, all those thoughts are going to come, and we're not trying to
Okay.
push any of those away, right? Sadness
Mm-hmm.
will come. We don't want to be without sadness. I mean, we're not talking
Right.
about numbing out. Or to be sad is to be human. To have thoughts, to be
Mm-hmm.
human. The thought, the mind thinks, the heart beats.
Mm-hmm.
You got to pay your bills, all of those things. Like you have to plan dinner, all of those things.
Okay. So
So
conventional things, good, not grasping, right? Just conventional living my life.
yeah,
Okay.
none of it's really grasping. So like you could have a gazillion thoughts and but you're still resting as the knower of thoughts.
Ah.
Where where grasping comes into mind is when you lose wakefulness. In other words, when you lose the knower,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could be doing something, analytical even, and yet know that you are, right? So let's say even if you were doing an analytical meditation and you're contemplating something,
Okay.
but you noticed, but you're aware of it if your mind takes a left turn and you get off topic and you start thinking about something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and then you bring the mind back to be on topic. So even you engaging thinking mind, we can do so in a meditative way,
Mm-hmm.
right? The meditative way I'm using in this instance is that I'm awake. I'm aware of what's
Right.
happening, right? I have that wakefulness. So I'm planning dinner, I'm out and about, and maybe I'm walking down the street, like you mentioned, and I'm watching craving mind creeping in.
Okay.
I'm watching attachment, like I want that cookie.
Uh-huh.
I'm going towards a cafe where there's a really good coffee or really good cookie,
Mm-hmm.
and I watch my mind want. I watch the craving mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? But now that I'm watching craving mind, I'm not craving mind, right? There's craving
Mm-hmm.
mind, and then the watcher of craving mind, the observer of
Ah,
craving
okay.
mind. And now that opens myself up to a little bit of choice. Now, if that craving is not too overwhelming, which sometimes cravings are,
Right.
we're practicing here, but let's say the
Sure.
craving isn't overwhelming craving.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because I've paused for a moment, I could introduce a little bit of wisdom in that moment. And maybe I decide in that moment to sit with what is craving. And I know this is probably not going to happen on the street, but I'm just kind of getting into it for the sake of
Mm-hmm.
getting into it. Maybe I could look at where do I feel craving in the body?
Mm-hmm.
Where like what kind of thoughts are arising right now? What's my emotional tone, right? And all of these things, like when we're looking at thoughts, emotions, body sensations, if we look at them, it gives us more and more space. If we just go with like I want a cookie,
Right.
it sounds like a big word here to say that we're overwhelmed by the craving, but in a way we are. We're kind of taken away, right?
Sure. Sure. I've let it take control in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But if I could say, oh, okay, it's the triangle of awareness, thoughts, emotions, body sensations. It's like, okay, craving is made up of these three things. I could look at those things.
Mm-hmm.
They're not so overwhelming now. Now that I'm kind of breaking it apart and time's passing, right? I haven't been just taken by that desire. Now maybe I don't need that cookie. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that option starts to arise. Like maybe I don't, or maybe I'll have a cookie later. Maybe that one comes into play as well, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? But it all goes back to that initial. We didn't grab hold of it, that non-grasping mind. When I need a cookie, I want a cookie. When that thought came, we didn't grab hold of it
Mm-hmm.
and go to sleep and then just run through that habitual pattern
Right.
of going and getting the cookie. We're awake. And it also means go ahead and get the cookie.
I was just going to ask you about that. I can still have the cookie if
And you
I'm
can have the
making the
cookie.
cookie if I'm guess I'm saying mindfully having the cookie, like understanding that I'm choosing the cookie, that I'm not letting the desire for the cookie control me.
Yeah, and also noticing, like, be mindful through the entire process that if you're eating a cookie, like, watch the whole process, watch craving mind come up,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I need this cookie, like it's gonna be something, it's gonna satisfy something.
Right.
And there's almost a notion, because we do this like constantly, it's gonna fill me up, it's gonna really satisfy me completely, like all these desires that the mind wants, right? But let's say a cookie, would we eat a cookie from, it's really the actual act of it is from the lips, from the front of the lips to the back of the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only actual physical part, right? So you the cookie touches your lips, maybe, if you're even paying attention, and then you're chewing it, and then you swallow, then the cookie's gone. Like, it's gone. Maybe it's 3 bites, 4 bites.
Right.
And then sit with it. Like, what happened? How did it actually taste? What happened to the sequentially with the craving? When did the craving was there before?
Right.
Did the craving end when you grabbed the cookie, when you purchased the cookie? Or did it shift or change? Did it shift or change when you took the first bite or the second bite? When did the craving diminish for the cookie? It did it.
Or did I want another one?
Or did you want another one?
Right.
And what happened then? Or let's say the craving did go away. When did the next craving appear? In other words, the cookie doesn't satisfy our craving mind.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's what
we move on to the next thing.
We move on to the next thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the only reason that we're practicing it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with cookies. It's that we really do want to find the part of ourselves that's obviously content and at ease without cookies, without these things, right? And of course, if it's something within ourselves, it's sustainable and reliable.
Mm-hmm.
If the attachment is to something outside of ourselves, it's simply not. It's simply not sustainable or reliable.
Do we sometimes, see if I can ask this right way, do we sometimes create an illusion where we think we are relying on something that's inside of ourselves and we're really not?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I would, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Right?
I think that's Tibetan Buddhism, they speak a lot to like clarifying the natural state.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think like the term like spiritual materialism and a lot of these other terms are the mental conceptualization or imputation on top of true self, right? So there's these different versions that the mind will make up.
How do I know if I, Margaret, am thinking that I've gone inward, right? I can't even think of an example, I'm sorry, but like, I think I'm relying on something that's inward. Like, I think I've done this, but it's really not. What would be some ways for me to discern, like, Margaret, no, you're not really relying on something inward. You're still relying on something external. What are ways to discern that?
Yeah. Great question. I think it's a mixture of continuing on our personal path and our own experience, also relying on our teachers, and also not judging ourselves through the process, right? Like, I know I've heard Soking Rinpoche stories come to mind, Joseph Goldstein stories coming to mind. I'll start with a quick little Joseph Goldstein story. And so he was speaking about when he started teaching, and he had this really altruistic motivation in his mind, right? And he's like, I want to teach because I want to share the Dharma and this and that. And then like, it was going really well. He taught a couple times. A lot of people showed up, and he said, "Oh, this is so great feedback, everything." The third time or something like that, the third time or so, nobody showed up. And he was like, oh, he felt like an ego hit. Right.
And
he's
like, where's everybody?
Yeah. And he's like, okay, maybe it's part altruism and part a little bit of ego here. And that's okay.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
that's all right.
It's okay to be
Um,
human.
it's okay to be human. And so it's okay to like move into inner resource tools, move into coping mechanisms that are more healthy, or
Hmm.
at least starting that path towards our inner resource tools, like into that inner freedom. So we're no longer, even just the intention to move inward.
Hmm.
And it's messy and it's not always pure, pure intention or whatever, or maybe it's
Yeah.
egoic. Maybe I'm spiritual Cayce, and my ego's cool. Like it wants to have, uh, I don't know, look spiritual or something. And hey, that's okay. Um, that's fine. Like, and
Sure.
then if we get into a point that we kind of drop that, and I have that. I'm sure I have that. I'm not
Hmm.
like free from egoic whatever after 30 something years or whatever. Um, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. That's a great story. I appreciate that. It reminds me of a teacher I had, and this was not a spiritual teacher, not intentionally anyway, but about the speaking thing. It was a business class, and he gave us this saying that I use to this day because I think it's so useful in many other ways, which is the right people show up. And in that instance, he was talking about when you start speaking in public, don't worry about who's in the audience or how many are in the audience because the right people show up. It's going to be how it's meant to be. And yes, that is true. But then I also find it just in other scenarios too, when you're going through experiences in life or learning about my own attachments and aversions, the right people show up to be part of the experience and to teach. And so I've always
Yeah,
loved that. I've always loved that phrase, the right people show up. Don't worry about it. The right
absolutely.
people show up. And yes, it did help me because there were times when I would go and, be invited to be a speaker someplace and I'd be like, cool. The room was full. And then there's other times I was like, really? 5 people? And I was like, you know what, Margaret? The right people show up. You're going to do this talk for 5 people like you would do it for 100 people.
That's right.
You need to
And
get
that's
over it.
and that's great on attachment,
Yeah. Yes,
non-attachment.
yes. Because I
Yeah,
definitely had
because
some attachments there to like, I can't believe
right.
people didn't show up to see me.
Yeah.
Who are
uh,
you?
Right. I just
No.
laugh now, like, because I just like I go into all the speaking engagements, and I just did like a UCLA thing and a UC
Mm-hmm.
Irvine thing, and sometimes I'm invited, but they don't know how many people. Like
Right.
they invite like a whole class or a section of the hospital or something, and I'm just like I'm here. I'm here for one person. I'm here for 100 people. Like
Mm-hmm.
and again, I think if we show up for life like that, there's just such a freedom of I'm here. Like I'm here. So
Yes.
that's I can't control if one person shows up or this or traffic is good or whatnot. It's like I'm here. So how are we going to be with ourselves?
There you go.
And if we worked on our inner environment and our relationship to our inner environment, we could hang out and be cool with whatever's going on externally.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain extent, depending
Sure.
on the situation, of course, and all that. But
Absolutely. So, what else would you want to tell us about this discussion we're having on attachment and other things?
um, I think the piece, I did definitely touch upon it, but I think
Mhm.
it can't be overemphasized is the importance of kindness and compassion towards self. Like not in a woo-woo way.
Mhm.
Like if you look at like Tibetan Buddhism, they they stress uh, compassion and kindness so much. It's a lot of our grasping mind, a lot of the attachment is coming from this me and mine energy, right? There's
Okay.
something to protect or something to gain, something to like, right? It's kind of like a lot of striving energy, a lot of like kind of fear energy
Mhm.
too, like like self-protecting or protecting our loved ones or something. It's very self-central, like a lot of, or self-centric. I don't know what the right word might be, but it's around this idea of self, and obviously fearlessness loving kindness and compassion can help with fearlessness, that energy, but also just selflessness, right? Just a sense of ease that I'm here for others, and there's a lot that can be released. A lot of attachment, a lot of attachment just stems from this more egoic concerns. So I think that practicing mindfulness, practicing heartfulness, making sure that a heart practice, it could be traditional loving kindness, it could be compassion, it could be very, very mundane types of practices that open up the heart, are extremely beneficial to release that grasping mind.
I understand what you're saying. As you were talking, I was thinking of a situation where I needed to open up my heart more towards how other people were experiencing an event. And then that definitely helped me a lot in how to navigate and work with, people and in certain circumstances, because it's that letting go of thinking of how I thought people should be experiencing something, and just recognizing this is how they're experiencing it.
Yeah.
Shift away from my attachment to how it was supposed to be to this is how it is, and providing compassion to their experience and their perceptions.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been super helpful. And before I let you go, I just want to see, is there any not last forever, but final thoughts you'd like to impart or share with the group?
No, I think that's a good little bit, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you. Yeah, if you're listening to this, I'm on Instagram too. And my name, CayceHowe. And I'd love to hear from you and connect.
Would you like to share your website too?
I think the main website would be sustainablecaring.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's very helpful for people. So thank you.
For sure. That would be great.
I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmeloni.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Meloni. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmeloni.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.